Chapter 8. The Races. Dawn was breaking when Michael and the rest of the stable lads roused themselves. Rouse means to get up, got themselves up. Race days always meant an early start. There were all the normal chores to be done, mucking out, the early morning ride out, which gave the horses a chance to gallop and warm up for the day ahead, as well as getting the chosen horses ready, grooming them till their coats shone and checking that all their tack was in perfect condition. Glengarry and Morning Boy, those are the names of the horses, stood lazily watching the goings-on from the small fenced enclosure for young foals. The colt was growing steadier on his feet and gaining weight. He was beginning to look healthier week by week. His ears pricked up as he watched the other race horses prepare to head off. Michael was almost reluctant to leave the stables and the small colt. "Promise me you'll take good care of Morning Boy," he begged young Brendan. "You know I will," replied the stable lad, aware of his friend's concern. "Make sure that the mare doesn't nip or bite at him. You know a mare can turn on a foal in an instant. Morning Boy is the small horse that we read about him being born, and he's being looked after by a different mare, a different female horse, because his mother died." "'Tis all right, Michael. I promise you I'll look after the two of them." "Michael O'Driscoll, you get up on that horse and stop holding us up," teased Toss. The rest of the jockeys were ready and were getting impatient waiting for him. "Make sure he's feeding properly," Michael shouted. He grabbed hold of the front of his saddle and pulled himself up onto Nero, and as soon as he was mounted they all clip-clopped out across the cobbled yard. It was always nerve-wracking setting off to the races. It was only then that you realised how good or bad the horses really were. The lads and grooms who were staying behind stopped what they were doing to wish them well. "Good luck to ye all. Let's hope ye have a winner." Michael had eaten very little for breakfast. In fact, he'd gone soft on the food for the last few days, trying to keep the weight off. So now we know Michael was acting as a jockey, so riding a horse in a race. And usually they try to keep themselves very light. His fellow jockey, Liam Quigley, was as small and light as a leprechaun and had no bother keeping to the right size. But Michael was a whole lot taller, and with his wide shoulders and strong build, he was a bit heavier than most jockeys. Still, Nero was a big horse, and he reckoned that was why Toss and Lord Henry had said he should ride him. Pather Mahony was riding in front of Michael. As usual, he held Jerk Point tight at the bit with a short rein. The lively black horse snorted angrily at being so restrained and tossed his head frantically. Toss was out in front of them all, lost in thought as he led the party across the dew-soaked fields at a gentle gallop. It was late afternoon by the time they arrived at Kilross, horses and riders equally weary and glad to rest. Remember, they would have had to go by horse to the races because there were no vehicles at the time, no motor vehicles. The animals were watered and fed. Nero munched at the sweet, juicy hay that Michael hung from the rack in his stall. Nearby, the racecourse lay flat and wide in the distance, ready for the next day's excitement. Though Pather and Liam tried to persuade him to join them for a stroll up the town, Michael decided to stay with Nero. He would enjoy just as well sitting listening to the stories of past races and exploits that the riders shared with each other as the evening drew in. Mercy Farrell, the young housemaid, had insisted he take a small package from her. Opening his bag, Michael discovered a portion of white chicken meat, some cold potato, a scone and a piece of some kind of pie. He tested it with his finger. 'Twas apple. Mercy had him spoiled. He only had to appear at the kitchen door to see how she was getting on, and she'd have him sitting at the table, stuffing him with food as she chattered on, the cook watching them. Cook wouldn't tolerate any lovey-dovey stuff in her kitchen, but she couldn't help but think that Michael O'Driscoll and young Mercy Farrell made a lovely couple. Michael put the apple tart aside. He'd save it till after his race, but the rest he'd eat now. He was hungry after the journey. Tonight he'd sleep in the stall with Nero. No one would tamper with any of the Buckland horses while he was around. Race day itself was good and dry with a nice bit of a breeze for racing. Michael's stomach was wound in a knot of apprehension as he prepared himself for the afternoon event. Apprehension means anxiety, worry about the race that was coming up. The small racecourse had started to fill up, the gentlemen and their visitors filing in to watch the spectacle. The gentlemen were clad in top hats and fine jackets, and they eyed the competition and considered the odds carefully before placing their bets. So remember, a lot of the gentlemen, the rich men, would have owned the horses, and then they were putting bets on as well as to who would win, which horse would win. Michael weighed in on the large scales before joining the lads that were in his race. So Michael would have had to weigh himself because he was a jockey, which means he would have been riding one of the horses. There were 8 runners. He smiled over at Ned Mangan and Todd O'Sullivan. They'd all raced against one another before. Nero quivered with excitement as they passed down by the crowds. "Good boy," said Michael, patting the horse's neck and shortening his stirrups a fraction more. Michael cantered Nero slowly down to the starting line. He had spotted Lord Henry in the distance, standing with a group of other gentlemen. "Best horse wins," shouted Todd O'Sullivan, his skinny face all eager and excited. Nero pranced about, itching to be off. Michael sat in the saddle, tense and alert, waiting for the signal. They were away. Todd O'Sullivan's horse took off like the wind, its swinging reddish tail out in front, taunting them all. Michael had to hold Nero steady. A burst of pace now would be too soon. He lifted himself off the saddle as speed surged through the horse. "Keep it steady, Nero." He could sense the racehorse getting into a strong, even stride as he raced forwards, arching his neck. Nero tightened the gap between himself and Todd O'Sullivan's horse. Closer, closer, until he passed him out. The grass seemed to race beneath Michael, and even the clouds that blew across the wide blue sky could not keep up with him. His heart was beating fast, just the way the horse's was. At this moment they were one, racing together. At his shoulder he caught a flicker of colour. Todd and some of the other lads were creeping up on him. He urged Nero on, faster, faster. The horse's powerful legs flew through the air, thundering against the earth. Then Todd's horse pushed itself on again, breathing heavily with the effort. Nero swung his full weight forward, trying to outdo the other. The blood coursed and pumped through Michael's head and veins and ears as he pushed Nero as hard as he could. It made no difference. Todd's horse pulled across the finishing line a second or 2 ahead of him. "Well done," he called to Todd, trying to swallow his bitter disappointment. "Tough luck," shouted Todd. "That horse of yours gave us a right chase." Michael watched as the winner was applauded. Applauded means the people clapped. He jumped down off Nero as soon as he saw Lord Henry and Toss appearing. "Well done, lad," smiled Toss. "You ran a great race." "But I didn't win," moaned Michael. "You did your best, Michael," said Lord Henry. "Nero will win sooner or later." Michael ran his fingers through his sweat-soaked hair, glad that neither man was annoyed with him. He decided to rub Nero down and then come back to watch how Liam and Pather got on in their races. Liam romped home on Troy, waving to Michael and the crowd, his small face creased with a huge grin. Jerkpoint was acting up a bit, and Michael had a job holding her still as Pather tried to mount her. The young jockey was annoyed as he galloped her down to the starting line where the other 5 entrants were waiting patiently. Lord Henry and his friends had put a large wager on her to win. Pather's face was taut. That means it was drawn or anxious looking or unsmiling. As he waited for the race to start, he still held the horse far too tight for Michael's liking. From the very first second, Jerkpoint was out in front, pushing ahead of the others, her jet black mane flying. Pather was using his stick like a madman, hitting her on as the rest of the field tried to catch them. The horse was terrified, and as they came more into his view, Michael knew that the mare was simply running her heart out to get away from the madman on her back. She crossed the line 4 lengths ahead of the rest of the field, and the spectators went wild. The spectators are the audience. Gentlemen came up immediately to clap Lord Henry on the back and congratulate him on his excellent win. A huge smile lit up Pather's long, gawky face as he savoured his moment of triumph. The horse was panting and shivering, the long welts on her flank showing like stripes against her sweaty coat, foam dripping from her mouth. So welts are cuts from where Pather had hit the horse. "Get off that horse," ordered Toss, handing Jerkpoint's rein to Michael. "You look after her, lad," he ordered, following Pather towards the presentation of prizes. Later, they all rode home in silence, Toss and Michael out in front. Jerkpoint was being led on a halter lead. She wasn't fit to be ridden. So Toss and Michael are really disappointed and angry at Pather for hitting the horse so hard in the race. "Are you disappointed about coming second, Michael?" asked Toss. Michael thought about it. "Nah, not really, Toss. Todd's horse was very good and he's ridden in far more races than I have. He's a good jockey." "More than I can say for some," muttered Toss. So, you see, they're talking about Pather, that he's not a good jockey because of the beating he gave the horse. "Todd's horse is a brother of Ragusa. Is that so?" inquired Toss. "That means the same bloodline as Morning Boy," added Michael knowledgeably. Knowledgeably means with knowledge, knowingly. "You're learning," chuckled Toss. Michael nodded. Toss had talked to him day in, day out about the importance of bloodline in a good horse. You could tell more about a horse by learning its family tree than by watching it race. So bloodline in a horse means who its mother and father were, and were they good horses, and its grandparents as well, maybe. Toss reckoned the Irish horse was the best in the world, strong and steady and with a heart as big as Galway Bay itself, wherever that was. Long ago, the bloodline of the best of Irish horses had been crossed with a strong Arab horse, which had charged into the Battle of the Boyne. The Byerly Turk had passed on his courage to his progeny, that means to his descendants, to the horses that came after him, his children and his grandchildren, creating a bloodline that passed through many of the colts and fillies that Toss would in time train. "You're a good lad, Michael, and the horses know it," murmured Toss. Michael could feel the happiness swelling inside him. He was itching to see Morning Boy and to tell Mercy about his race. He knew the kind-hearted girl would hug him even more when she heard that Nero and himself were the runners-up. "I've had more than enough of you, my lad." Michael heard the anger in Toss's voice. It was the day after the races and he was busy polishing some of the tack in preparation for the early ride-out when Toss and Pather Mahony walked through the door of the harness room. "Careless, stupid, cruel. That's what I'd call it." "It's only a damned horse," came Pather's smart reply. "Look, my lad, you'd better begin to understand. These horses are our bread and butter. The other men hereabouts have to break the ground and till the fields and tend the sheep and do all sorts of labour for his lordship. So labour is work. We're lucky. We are the ones responsible for his horses." "I'm the best jockey he's got. You know that, Toss," shouted Pather angrily. "That don't give you no right to treat a purebred horse like that. It's not a cart horse, you know. Them horses cost a fortune. You should see the bills for their feed." Michael could see Pather shrugging his shoulders. He didn't care that he had overridden Jerpoint. He'd won, hadn't he? The racehorse was still in a desperate state, but Pather seemed to think that all the rules for caring for a horse could be broken, and it didn't matter. "I'm not about to sit back and let you destroy a good horse," said Toss, "because that's what's going to happen." "I'll run good races, win all around me. In time I'll win in the Curragh," jeered the young jockey. "I'll win in England too," he added. "I'll make his lordship a fortune. A racehorse needs a firm hand." "It don't make a difference if you're the best jockey in the whole of Ireland. The horse is the thing. You have to care for the horse. I can't have anybody around this yard that don't understand the value of these horses. I won't have them, and Lord Henry agrees with me." "Lord Henry?" "Aye, he saw Jerpoint this morning." "What would he know about it?" shrugged Pather. "More than you think. I've instructions to give you your marching orders," said Toss firmly. Marching orders means to give him the sack or to send him away, stop him working there. "However, I'm giving you one last chance, but one more misdeed, one more wrong thing, and you're finished here at Castle Taggart, my lad." Pather stood for a second, stunned, his greasy brown hair falling over his eyes. "And for the moment you look after the rest of the horses," continued Toss. "The other lads will attend to the racers and you'll do no riding out. And, by the way, you'll be the one to muck out Jerpoint's stable while she's resting up." Muck out means to clean out. Without a word, Pather turned on his heel and left the tack room. Michael coughed. "You heard?" asked Toss uneasily. Michael nodded. "The lad's a good rider, but he has a lot to learn about horses, else he's no use to us." With that, Toss took down one of the leather saddles and left. Michael loved the early morning ride-out. It was the time that he treasured most in the whole day. The horses were fresh and itching to gallop, the chilly morning air turning their breath to clouds. Each racehorse had a different temperament, all needing a different approach. some gentle coaxing and patting, others a sharp hand. It was only when Michael checked in on Jerpoint later that he wondered about Pather. The horse was standing in a fresh pile of dung. Why the hell hadn't Pather tended to her? He searched around the stables and out by the paddocks, but there wasn't sight nor sign of him. Michael climbed up to the sleeping quarters above the coach house and looked in the corner that Pather had made his own. Pather's blanket was still there, but there was no sign of any of his clothes or boots or his few personal bits and pieces. He's done a runner, thought Michael to himself. Has Mr. Know-it-all taken himself off? Brendan had followed Michael up to the room. Michael shrugged. It looks like it. I'd heard that toss give out to him this morning. Good riddance is what I say. The young stable boy smirked. Smirked means grinned. He had so often got a clatter from Pather for no reason. A clatter is been hit, a belt, a punch. Nobody's going to miss the likes of Pather. Yeah, I suppose so, agreed Michael, though secretly he was sure they hadn't heard the last of Pather Mahoney, not by a long shot. So that's the conclusion of that chapter. That was called The Races, and that was chapter number 8. Hope you liked it. Have a think about what might happen next in the book.